Undercover CEO caught janitor doing office work. At 3 a.m., what he did next is shocking. He went undercover expecting to find small issues, but instead, he uncovered a silent storm threatening the very soul of his company. Meridian Solutions Tower stood tall in the heart of the city, a proud symbol of cutting-edge technology. But tonight, under the faint glow of security lights, the 48-story building felt eerily cold, much like the lifeless numbers that Gavin Royce, founder and largest shareholder of the corporation, could no longer make sense of. At 50, he should have been comfortably perched at the pinnacle of his career, basking in the glory of the empire he'd built from an old garage. But instead of a plush leather chair and blinding stage lights, tonight Gavin quietly stood in the elevator, dressed in a worn khaki uniform, cheap plastic frame glasses, and a digital watch hastily bought at a convenience store. He was the perfect James Fuller, an anonymous night shift supervisor. Trust but verify, his father used to say. And now, that very trust was fracturing, as polished financial reports masked something far darker. Revenue remained steady, yet profits were plummeting. Veteran employees, those who had weathered every storm with him, were quietly leaving. The reason? A dry note in their files, seeking new opportunities. Too neat, too perfect, and utterly untrue. Gavin stepped out of the elevator. The hallway on the 14th floor stretched endlessly ahead, unsettlingly silent. This should have been the time when cleaning carts rolled through, and the faint hum of vacuum cleaners echoed down the empty halls. But there was nothing, only the soft murmur of ventilation and the pounding of his own heart. He passed by the office spaces, his experienced eyes scanning every hidden corner. Suddenly, a faint light spilled from a workstation at the end of the corridor. Gavin stopped, heart tightening in his chest. A janitorial cart sat abandoned by the water cooler, untouched. The trash bags remained full, cleaning sprays and cloths still pristine, as if they'd never been used. Then, in the distance, he spotted a man hunched over a glowing computer screen. On his gray uniform hung a lanyard, Marco Bennett, janitorial staff. Gavin knew that face. One of those forgettable people no one ever paid attention to. But tonight, Marco's fingers danced across the keyboard with a speed and mastery no ordinary janitor should possess. The computer screen's glow reflected in Gavin's eyes like a warning siren. He stood motionless behind the wall, his heart hammering. This wasn't just about shady financial reports anymore. A silent storm was brewing within the very empire he had believed to be unshakable. And tonight, Gavin Royce, more accurately, the undercover CEO, would trace the cracks that someone had tried so desperately to bury. The clock's hands crept past 3 a.m. In the suffocating stillness of the 14th floor, where concrete and steel swallowed every sound, Gavin Royce held his breath behind the cold wall, his eyes locked on the man leaning closer and closer to that glowing screen. Marco Bennett, the name on that dangling badge, didn't look like a man committing a crime. His movements were calm, precise, as if he'd done this 100 times before. Those rough, calloused hands, worn down by physical labor, moved across the keyboard with the speed and precision of a seasoned IT specialist. The computer screen revealed things no janitor should ever have access to. Confidential HR files, executive compensation reports, internal complaint log. Files marked as resolved bore a chilling red note, delete after quarterly report. And it wasn't just digital files. Spread across the desk were shredded paper fragments, carefully reassembled with tape like an intricate puzzle. Gavin clenched his fists. What were those scraps, if not evidence someone had tried to destroy? Then, the moment that made his blood run cold, Marco pulled a small USB stick from his shirt pocket and plugged it directly into the machine. On the screen, a file appeared with a strange name. Whistleblower Project. This wasn't just petty fraud anymore. Gavin quietly pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly but his gaze rock steady. In the dark, he captured every detail. A close-up of the screen, Marco's hands gliding over the keyboard, the confidential files being copied. The typing stopped. Marco looked up sharply, eyes scanning the room. Gavin pressed his back flat against the wall, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. But after a few tense seconds, Marco resumed. With swift, practiced keystrokes, he erased every trace, logged out, ejected the USB, slipped it back into a hidden pocket inside his uniform. Everything looked as if nothing had happened. As Marco pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway, Gavin stepped toward the workstation. The screen now displayed only a standard login page, every trace wiped clean. But what Marco didn't know was that the undercover CEO had seen it all. Gavin took a deep breath, his eyes hard as steel, His suspicions now had a name and a face. And from this moment, the investigation would no longer be a cautious probe, it would be a relentless hunt for the truth. Because if trust had been stolen, Gavin Royce swore he'd be the one to take it back. Gavin Royce was no longer a spectator. For the next 48 hours after that fateful encounter, he immersed himself deep into the labyrinth of data and hidden corners he never imagined existed within the empire he built. The HR department, supposedly the guardian of the company's core values, was, in fact, the epicenter of corruption. The name Ivan Clark, Director of Human Resources and head of the Perfect Corporate Culture Initiative, appeared again and again in shady reports and tampered documents. The Internal Rewards Program, once a proud symbol of Meridian Solutions, had turned into a tool for manipulation. Those spotless 100% satisfaction ratings weren't born from real innovation or effort. They were bought at the cost of vanished complaint records, emails permanently deleted from the system, and employees who dared to speak up, quietly disappearing from the office, their desks cleared overnight. With absolute power in the HR department, Ivan enforced a covert policy. Anyone who submitted a complaint would be flagged in the internal management system. Those who spoke up would never be considered for promotion. Anyone who couldn't take the pressure and resigned would be officially recorded as left for personal reasons to keep the statistics looking clean. During that investigation, Gavin traced the trail back to Marco Bennett, the man he had only seen through the lens of a janitor that night. But Marco wasn't demoted because of incompetence. He had simply known too much. Gavin knew he needed allies. And then, a name surfaced like a faint glimmer of light in that suffocating maze. Lena, a young, idealistic HR specialist who had always stayed on the sidelines, quietly observing and documenting the things no one else dared to say aloud. Their first meeting took place at a small cafe tucked beneath the towering Meridian Solutions building. Lena kept her head low, cautiously passing Gavin a tiny USB drive, her eyes filled with both worry and hope. "Mr. Royce, I don't know if I can trust anyone, but if even you have to go undercover to find the truth, then maybe this is the moment I can't stay silent anymore." Gavin gently squeezed Lena's trembling hand, his eyes filled with unwavering determination. "We don't back down anymore, Lena. The truth can't just be deleted with a single keystroke, and this time, I'm here to make sure of that." Then, from hurried meetings at that hidden cafe, to dark warehouse basements, to empty parking garages at midnight, piece by piece, the buried evidence came to light. Gavin slowly reconnected with those who had been erased from the system simply for daring to raise their voices. Sandra Miyazaki, a former data analyst, she discovered discrepancies in the financial reports, but was restructured out of her job. Darius Wells, former head of engineering, was ousted after protesting against policies that forced unpaid overtime. And many other names, people who were reduced to a cold line in the HR database, left for personal reasons. Gavin quietly wrote their names down in his worn leather notebook, every name a solemn vow. "We will bring justice back. By the honor of a CEO, I will make this right." Under the dim lights of the cafe in the basement, Gavin Royce sat in silence, his fingers lightly tapping against the worn wooden table. Outside, the soft drizzle of rain made the night even more somber. Lena Tross entered, her eyes scanning the room cautiously before quietly closing the glass door behind her. In her hands was a folder wrapped in thick black cover stuff, very one she had hidden away for months, too afraid to bring into the light until now. She placed the folder on the table, but her hands still clung tightly to it. "Do you know that in the current HR system, there's an encrypted term specifically used for people who are considered incompatible with corporate culture?" Gavin frowned slightly. Lena took a deep breath and opened the folder. Inside were printed pages filled with strange personnel codes only those in HR would understand. TMC, O2, ADP, null, LVL, shadow. TMC O2 means that the employee once filed a complaint and has since been removed from the promotion list. ADP null is a tag for employees who will never receive a pay raise, no matter how well they perform. And LVL shadow, that's the silent death sentence. They are completely isolated, excluded from critical assignments, their names missing from strategic meetings, left to wither away until they grow disheartened and resign on their own. Gavin clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He had never imagined such a mental assassination program could exist within his own company. Lena's voice trembled as she continued. This is the list of those who were labeled with these tags over the past 18 months. She flipped the page. The first name that appeared was Sandra Miyazaki. Then Darius Wells, Terrence Foster. These were people who had given their sweat and blood to help Meridian grow, now reduced to nothing more than cold, heartless codes in a soulless system. Gavin gripped the documents tightly. Who authorized this system? Lena looked him straight in the eyes, unwavering. Yvonne Clark, and with the silent approval of those who have power, but no conscience. Gavin knew he couldn't wait another moment. That very night, he and Lena quietly reviewed the entire access history of the HR system, tracing every altered log entry, every document that should have been archived but had mysteriously disappeared. And then Lena produced the most valuable evidence of Alice's security key that only Yvonne and a select few on the board had access to. But somehow, Lena had recovered a temporary access codian oversight Yvonne made during a routine system audit. Gavin didn't hesitate. That very night, they infiltrated the digital archives, the deepest security level of Meridian Solutions, where files thought to have been permanently destroyed were kept. The pale blue light of the monitor reflected off Gavin's aged yet resolute face. One by one, the documents thought to be lost forever surfaced. Original grievance reports with authentic employee signatures. Internal emails instructing to handle delicately those who spoke up. And worst of all, a pre-programmed blacklist within the recruitment system, blocking all future applications from former employees who had resigned after filing complaints. Gavin clenched his jaw, unable to hide his fury. They weren't just driven out of Meridian, they were shut out permanently, blocked from returning, and even denied opportunities with partner companies. This isn't just the end of a job, it's the deliberate destruction of entire careers. Lena murmured softly, her voice choking. They call it the cultural purification policy. Gavin stood up, his eyes hardening in the dark. Then it's time to cleanse this filth from Meridian Solutions. And this time, I'll do it personally. Under the luxurious crystal chandeliers of Meridian Solutions' rooftop conference hall, the atmosphere was heavier than lead. 300 employees filled the room to capacity, and the board members exchanged uneasy glances. On stage, Yvonne Clark, HR director, stood confidently in a perfectly tailored gray suit, a polished smile on her lips as she concluded her presentation on exemplary corporate culture. Oh, and as you've seen, this year, Meridian has once again maintained a perfect employee satisfaction rating. Scattered applause broke out perhaps from those still sitting in the safety zone or from those on the priority list. But then, the atmosphere shifted as a deep, steady voice rose from the back of the room. I'm afraid today, there's a different story that needs to be told. Every head turned. Gavin Royce, the founder, the largest shareholder, the man who hadn't appeared at any internal event for the past 2 years, was slowly making his way toward the stage. No crisp business suit, no power tie, just rolled up sleeves and eyes ablaze with righteous fire. Yvonne hesitated for a brief second, but quickly regained her composure. Mr. Royce, perhaps we should proceed with the scheduled program. Gavin strode confidently onto the stage, his voice ringing out with the clarity and weight of a cathedral bell. There's no other agenda today, Yvonne. Today, we speak only of the truth. He nodded toward Lena Truss, seated in the third row. With a single tap on her tablet, all the massive screens in the conference hall switched simultaneously. Displayed side by side, the original grievance documents and their manipulated counterparts, employee names, timestamps, and the original complaint, contental, laid bare for every eye to see. But it didn't stop there. On every employee's personal laptop and phone, a notification popped up simultaneously in email containing a link to the digital evidence archive, complete with full documentation, meeting transcripts, and even audio recordings painstakingly collected by Marco Bennett over the past 18 months. The air became so tense, it felt suffocating. Gavin turned his gaze toward the executive board seats. This isn't just about manipulated numbers. This is about dignity trampled, careers destroyed, and cries for help buried beneath fabricated clean reports. And then, through the near-total silence, footsteps echoed. Marco Bennett, still in his worn janitor uniform but standing tall for the first time in years, walked into the center of the hall. No one saw him as invisible anymore. I am Marco Bennett. I was once an HR administrator until I saw things no one was supposed to see. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd, then turned toward the stage. Yvonne Clark, you personally ordered the deletion of original records, erased the careers of those who dared to speak up, and when you couldn't silence me, you turned me into a ghost in my own company. One by one, The names of the victims were read aloud. One by one, they rose from their seats in the hall, each sharing their stories. Sobs filled the air. Tears fell freely. And with that, every political facade in the room crumbled. Ivan stiffened, trying to respond, but a security officer had already positioned himself beside her. Gavin turned to her, his voice cold as steel. Yvonne Clark, you are terminated immediately. All personal data and company property will be confiscated, and I will personally work with law enforcement to investigate your criminal liability. A collective gasp rippled through the hall, then suddenly applause. Not hesitant, not scattered, but a roaring, unstoppable wave of thunderous applause, like a long overdue storm breaking loose. Gavin swept his eyes across the conference hall, his voice lifting clearly. But today, we are not just ending mistakes, we are starting something new. He stepped down from the stage and stood beside Marco. I hereby announce the establishment of the Employee Protection Council, an independent organization with authority equal to the executive board. Its mission will be to oversee all HR policies, ensuring every voice is heard and protected. And the person to lead this organization, Gavin turned, firmly clasping Marco's hand, is the man who quietly defended the truth when all of us turned our backs on it, Marco Bennett. From this day forward, you are appointed the director of the Employee Protection Council at Meridian Solutions. No one remained seated. Hundreds of people rose to their feet, their applause erupting into a thunderous roar. For the first time, Gavin saw Marco Bennett smile a smile drenched in tears, yet full of pride. And in that moment, there were no longer divides between CEO and janitor, between executive and frontline worker. There were only people who had dared to stand up for the truth and begin again from cracks that once seemed impossible to mend. Ivan turned pale. Right at that moment, Marco Bennett, the man who had been demoted to janitorial work for the past 18 months, stepped onto the stage. Still wearing his faded janitor's uniform, but his eyes shone brighter than ever before. I am Marco Bennett, he spoke, his voice resounding across the hall. And I am the living proof of everything she tried to bury. Marco told his story from the day he was forced out of the HR department after uncovering Ivan's manipulation of employee records, to the long nights spent collecting discarded evidence and the secret conversations with wrongfully dismissed employees. When he paused, dozens of former and current employees stood up to continue the testimony. Each of them carried a story, a pain, a living testament to the corruption of the system. The hall erupted. Applause, tears, and grateful gazes all turned toward Marco. And there, in front of everyone, Gavin declared, "Today, Meridian Solutions ends the era of silence. From this moment, I officially establish the Employee Protection Council, an independent body with authority equal to the HR department, reporting directly to the board. And the person to lead it, who knows better than anyone the value of truth and courage, is Mr. Marco Bennett." Marco's eyes wavered with overwhelming emotion. Before he could even speak, the applause thundered like a storm, and this time, no one remained seated. Ivan was immediately terminated on the spot. Security personnel approached and escorted her out amidst the scornful gazes of hundreds of employees. Senior executives involved were also ordered to leave the meeting room and await an official internal investigation. At that moment, Meridian Solutions didn't just change the head of HRIT, transformed the entire company culture. No more hollow promises, only actions, transparency, and fairness, exactly the vision Gavin had dreamed of when he began this journey. And the person once most forgotten was now one ushering in a new era. That morning, after the stormy historical meeting, sunlight shone upon the glass tower of Meridian Solutions as a symbol of rebirth. And inside, every breath the company took felt different. No longer did hallways echo with footsteps avoiding one another. People began to greet each other with honest gazes, firmer handshakes, and a phrase long thought forgotten, "Are you doing okay?" The reward policy based on fabricated satisfaction ratings was abolished immediately after the meeting by Gavin Royce. The management system was overhauled from its very roots. New rewards were now tied to transparency, ethics, and the actual quality of work. Gone were the glossy reports bought with sweat, tears, and injustice. Marco Bennett, the man who once silently pushed a janitor's cart through the cold, lonely corridors, now stepped into his new office. The room wasn't lavishly decorated, but simple and welcoming, with glass walls that looked directly onto the open workspace. His door never closed, and on his desk wasn't the usual nameplate, but a hand-carved wooden sign. Executive Director, Employee Protection Council, Marco Bennett. This door is always open. The Employee Protection Council now held real authority. All decisions regarding personnel, promotions, transfers, or grievance resolutions had to pass through Marco and his team people, who were once victims and now stood to protect the very values they had nearly lost. Throughout the company, old files that had been forcibly erased were restored. Names once coldly deleted from the system were given back their dignity. Employees who had quietly left under pressure were, if they chose to return, welcomed with a handwritten apology from Gavin Royce himself. No embellishment, no excuses, just a heartfelt sentence. We were wrong, and the door is always open if you're willing to come back. In just 6 months, Meridian Solutions not only recovered but also became an icon of corporate reform. The press called it the miracle of the invisible hand, the story of Marco Bennett, and the journey of bringing a corporate empire back to its human values. But it didn't stop there. Gavin and Marco launched the total transparency model, calling on other corporations to sign a commitment to build healthy workplace cultures. A coalition of pioneering companies was born, the New Standard Initiative turning what once seemed like empty slogans into measurable, verifiable actions. At the first signing ceremony of the initiative, before hundreds of CEOs and corporate leaders, Marco Bennett stood at the podium. His eyes scanned the hall filled with people who once believed that power only resided on the top floors. And with a warm, resolute voice, he concluded his speech to thunderous, unending applause. Corporate culture is not built from perfect reports. It is built by people brave enough to speak the truth, even when no one is willing to listen. That very day, a new plaque was installed at the main lobby of Meridian Solutions. Not a flashy slogan, but words etched into steel, enduring and impossible to erase. The light of trust is not switched on by a button, but kindled every day by integrity and kindness. And with that light, Meridian Solutions found its way forward, not merely to recover, but to become a lighthouse guiding an entire generation of future businesses. After that earth-shattering meeting, Meridian Solutions was like a ship once battered by storms, now gradually finding its course again in calm seas. But none of them mistook this peace as something easily won. Because the journey to rebuild wasn't just about fixing balance sheets, it was about resurrecting from the ashes the very values they had once buried. A day after the historic meeting, Marco Bennett officially walked into his new office. There were no fresh flowers welcoming him, no celebratory party. Instead, as he crossed the threshold, more than 50 employees from various departments silently stood in 2 rows. They said nothing, only bowed their heads slightly, silent acknowledgement of the days they had passed him by without noticing, too afraid or unwilling to face the truth. Marco simply bowed back, his hand gently brushing over the wooden plaque on his desk engraved with 3 lines. This door is always open. No one is invisible here, and every voice matters. In his first days, Marco immediately set to work on the hardest task: restoring trust. He personally organized open dialogue sessions, not in luxurious meeting rooms, but right in the common area where performative sharing sessions once took place. At every session, he didn't stand behind a podium, but sat at the same level, listening to stories that had long been buried. There were stories told through tears, long sighs heavy with grievance. Some spoke and then fell silent in sobs. Others stood up in anger, ready to leave, but this time, no one was stopped or coerced into staying. Within just 1 week, the drawer was filled with applications from employees who had once been forced to resign. Gavin Royce, once the company's founder and now a quiet companion, personally signed each letter, restoring their honor and benefits. These weren't cookie-cutter corporate letters, but handwritten notes, sometimes a bit clumsy, but overflowing with sincerity. Each letter ended with the same heartfelt line: "If you return this time, we will rebuild together from what is right." As for Marco, he didn't stop at simply soothing old wounds. Within the first month, alongside Sandra Miyazaki, recently reinstated as head of data analytics, launched the anonymous feedback platform, The Lighthouse. This online system allowed every employee, from receptionists, janitors, to department heads, to submit feedback, suggestions, and even whistleblowing reports without revealing their identity. What made it unique? All feedback was publicly tracked for resolution progress, and anyone could check its status. Lena Trasnow, promoted to head of human resources oversight, stood before all employees and made this solemn vow: from today, no document will be altered without a trace. No voice will go unheard, and no one will have to choose silence just to keep food on the table. 6 months later, the financial report of Meridian Solutions made the entire industry take notice. Though profits didn't skyrocket overnight, The real employee satisfaction rate jumped from 62 to 91%. Even more remarkable, job applications quadrupled compared to the same period last year. And during interviews, candidates no longer just asked about salaries and benefits. They asked directly, if injustice happens here, can we speak up without fear of being cast out? Marco simply smiled and replied, we don't need people who stay silent out of fear. We need those who dare to speak so the truth is always illuminated. On the one-year anniversary of that historic turning point, a small, humble ceremony took Placino fanfare. No media coverage. Gavin Royce stood in the main hall, where once a flashy sign with hollow slogans hung. With solemn hands, he removed it and replaced it with a new plaque. Forged from polished steel, the lights on a sign can be turned on with a switch, but the light within the human heart must be lit with kindness and integrity day after day. And just beneath that motto, a smaller plaque read, in honor of the one who rekindled the light, Marco Bennett, the man who was never invisible. In that moment, there was no need for thunderous applause. People simply stood there, eyes glistening, because for the first time in years, Meridian Solutions truly experienced a clear, hopeful dawn. As the last rays of the day gently filtered through the highest windows of the Meridian Solutions headquarters, slow footsteps echoed through the grand lobby. Marco Bennett, no longer wearing his old gray janitor uniform, but now dressed in a simple suit, a new badge proudly displayed on his chest. Executive Director, Employee Advocacy Division. He stood quietly before the newly installed honor plaque. His hand lightly touched the deeply engraved steel letters, cold to the touch, but radiating a strange, powerful warmth. Around him, the soft sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, voices of people who had once been buried under the weight of the old system, now joining forces to build a Meridian with a true, living soul. Somewhere in the building, Gavin Royce stood silently by a window, his expression no longer tense as it had been on the day he first returned in his humble disguise. Because now, the light he had longed to see no longer came from numbers on reports, but from genuine smiles and heartfelt handshakes across every floor. And when night fell and the meeting room lights gradually dimmed, what remained was not slick presentation slides or beautiful promises written on paper. It was a quiet light weaving its way into the darkest corners, rekindling in every once burdened heart the belief that justice doesn't come from perfect reports. It comes from those who dare to speak up, from hearts that refuse to bow to injustice. And like a final message echoing through the halls of Meridian Solutions, carried on the footsteps of those renewed with hope and ambition. The lights in the meeting room may go dark after each session, but the light within the human heart once lit by integrity and courage will shine forever.